Ambarishasya bhopate Sankirtayan anudhyayan Bhakto bhagavato bhavit Ityetat punyam akyanam Ambarishasya bhopate Sankirtayan anudhyayan Bhakto bhagavato bhavit. Ladies. Iti tat punyam akyanam Ambrishasya bhopate Sankirtayan anudhyayan Bhakto bhagavato bhavit Iti tat punyam akyanam Iti, thus, etat, this, punyam akyanam, most pious activity in history, Ambarishasya, of Maharaj Ambarisha, Bhopate, O King Maharaj Parikshit, Sankirtayan, by chanting, repeating, Anudhyayan, or by meditating upon, Bhaktaha, a devotee, Bhagavataha, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhavet, one can become. Translation, anyone who chants this narration or even thinks of this narration about the activities of Maharaj Ambarish, you ready? Certainly becomes a pure devotee of the Lord. Congratulations, Prabhus. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur herein gives a very good example. When one is very eager for more and more money, he's not satisfied even when he is a millionaire or a multimillionaire, but wants to earn more and more money by any means. The same mentality is present in a devotee. The devotee is never satisfied thinking, this is the limit of my devotional service. The more he engages in the service of the Lord, the more service he wants to give. This is the position of a devotee. Maharaj Ambarish in his family life was certainly a pure devotee, complete in every respect, because his mind and all his senses were engaged in devotional service. In referring to a verse from the previous chapter, Savai Manak Krishna Padara Vindayor Vachangsi Vaikunta Gunanavarnane. Maharaj Ambarish was self-satisfied because all his senses were engaged in devotional service. Another reference, Sarvapadi Vanir Bhuktam Tat Partvain Nirmalam Rishikendra Rishikesha Sevanam Bhaktir Uchate. Nonetheless, although Maharaj Ambarish had engaged all his senses in devotional service, he left his home and went to the forest to concentrate his mind fully at the lotus feet of Krishna, exactly as a mercantile man even though complete in wealth, tries to earn more and more. This mentality of getting more and more engaged in devotional service puts one in the most exalted position. Whereas, on the karma platform, the mercantile man who wants more and more money becomes increasingly bound and entangled. The devotee becomes increasingly liberated. This pastime, the Maharaj Ambarish pastime, certainly ranks really high in the sections of the Srimad Bhagavatam that are favored by devotees and favors the devotees who hear them. I mean, gosh, just hearing this, you go back to Godhead. You become a pure devotee. Keep hearing it, because it does. Now, how do we take statements like this? Anticipating a question. I don't feel like I'm a pure devotee, but I heard the pastime, so what's going on? Is there a contradiction? Is it a false eulogy? It's a hyperbole. It's something to pump us up, and it's really not true. But it's just, go ahead, Prabhu, pay attention because it's good for you. How do we take these things? There's different ways of answering that. One way is there's potency sufficient to do this. One of my favorite examples from Nectar Devotion, because we've all experienced attending Rath Yatras. Anyone who attends Rath Yatra and stands in appreciation manifests form of Vaikuntha. And that's not what I see when people are standing and, oh, look at this procession. And nonetheless, there's a potency. And sometimes the potency manifests itself, and sometimes the potency manifests itself even within unqualified persons. But generally speaking, the potency is there for those that have the receivers on and can receive the potency, and it's all benedictory up to the point of pure devotion. That is, the past times of a devotee are as good as the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. And the pastimes of the Supreme Lord are no different than the Supreme Lord, and association with the Supreme Lord is sufficient to awaken pure devotion. So there's a potency within these narrations, and it's drawing special attention to this one out of the many, many. It's not that at the end of every chapter there's this particular benediction promise, but this is drawing special light to this. This is a very special devotee, and his relationship with the Supreme Lord is very special. A couple other short comments. From reading Prabhupada's books over a number of years, the method that Prabhupada used to compose his Bhaktivedanta purports over a period of time, my sense is recognizing the capacity of the audience. It's not just a new audience, first canto, new audience, who he was writing for. He didn't quote references as much in his purports to those earlier audiences. He made a pablamized reference, the essence reference of those to those verses, but he didn't specifically cite the Sanskrit verses because for new people it might be intimidating, like, what's this, and here's another one, and here's another one. Rather, in the earlier writings, Prabhupada would often just summarize in simple language. And maybe you have done this before, I've done this. Go through one of the early purports of the Bhagavatam, and practically every sentence is a simple English language reference to something from Scripture, and then moves to something else from Scripture and something else from Scripture. It's always with reference to Scripture, because that was that's how he understood his function. That is the function. One giving instruction is the message carrier, the postal peon from the Scriptures to others, recognizing the audience, the capacity of the audience to assimilate and digest the message. But he's just a postal peon. I mean, postal peon of Krishna is fantastic. It's exalted. The problem is not being the postal peon. The problem is doing some editing or superimposing something along with this, the message from Krishna to the world, and refraining from speculation like that. That's where the challenge comes, for some at least. But the principle is quite simple. So in his later writings, he would some shift from summarizing the essence of some scriptural reference and actually cite the scriptural reference. So he's done that here without, in the Bhaktivedanta Purport, saying where it's from. So people that are not familiar with the scripture may want to know, where is this from? It's Sanskrit, okay, and Prabhupada is not making things up, so there is a reference. Commonly, there's some reference, and in this case, he just cites the verse. And those who are attentive know that Savaimana Krishna Padara Vindayo is from the previous chapter. And this other verse, Sarvopadi Vinir Bhuktam, that's also, it's a scriptural reference from Narada Pancharatra. It's a definition of bhakti, and it's one of our standard definitions of bhakti. For those that have been accustomed to reading or hearing or both, you know where it's from. And it's in the 9th canto, it's not in the 1st canto. It's not like Prabhupada barred himself from making specific scriptural references. He wasn't reluctant to do that. He was just being sensitive to his audience. That's a comment. Now, the chapter summary. So we'll go back to where the previous chapter ended. The previous chapter ended with Vishnu instructing Durvasa Muni, you want relief from Sudarshan Chakra? You go to the person who Sudarshan Chakra is protecting and smashing, ready to burn you because of offending. So you go back to the one offended. And not just, beg pardon, but if you receive the pardon, then you're okay. The reaction is now mitigated. That's where the other previous chapter ended. So off he goes. I mean, at the end of this exchange with Ambarish, Durvasa Muni he's a powerful person. When he leaves Maharaj Ambarish's kingdom, he goes, to the sun planet. Now, who can get on something and go to the sun planet? And who can even enter into the sun planet? Durvasa Muni. He's not an ordinary fellow. He's not just a Brahmana. He's a partial incarnation. Did we discuss this? Yes. Someone's nodding. Yes? No. Who's Durvasa Muni? Besides, he's a kind of a mystical yogi personality that's not yet a devotee. But after association, I can explain. You want to explain? Huh? I did mention it. Partial incarnation of Lord Shiva. Son of Atri and Anasuya. Okay. Partial incarnation of Lord Shiva. How powerful is Lord Shiva? And even a partial incarnation of Lord Shiva is very, very powerful. But unlike Lord Shiva, who is a topmost devotee, Durvasa had some pieces missing in his bhakti account, so he had to have a little problem. So he went back, and he fell at the feet of, literally, fell at the feet and clasped the feet of Maharaj Ambarish, who was really embarrassed, because Maharaj Ambarish isn't thinking of himself, I'm a great devotee. He was a very humble person. And that's part of the characteristic of a great devotee. And here's this, not just Brahmana, but super duper Brahmana, clinging to my feet. Whew. And the Sudarshan Chakra, one of the features, I'd like to read exactly what Ambarish Maharaj prays to Sudarshan Chakra, because it discloses, in case you wanted to know, what's Sudarshan Chakra anyways, we can find out. It's right in the chapter. It's really nice. Just before, many of you know, Shyamsundar left for India yesterday. And we had a nice conversation before he left. And he reminded me of something I had forgotten, that some time ago I sent him a document that has a list of the 25 sets of prayers within Srimad Bhagavatam. Does anybody in this room have that list? Radha Krishna, do you have that list? Anyone have that list? I can't see. I don't have my glasses on. Yes? No? Oh, there you are. Okay. So this is one of the prayers. It's a prayer to Sudarshan. Now, Sudarshan isn't the Supreme Lord, but Sudarshan is just like, when there's Jagannath, Subhadra, and Baladev, or the other way, Baladev, Subhadra, Jagannath. There's also Sudarshan. And when Krishna has a very formidable demon to deal with, invariably, Sudarshan. He does other things, but when it comes to like finishing the business, it's Sudarshan. Usually, almost always. And sometimes there's discussion in the Bhagavatam that they want to arrange for Krishna to be not where Sudarshan is. But that's a material calculation, because he just has to think of Sudarshan. Sudarshan is there. Even it may not be visible. They're inseparable. So I'll read. It's not a long chapter, and it's very important. Ambarish was feeling ashamed. And when he saw Durvasa attempting to offer prayers because of mercy, he was aggrieved even more. Like he's being harassed. There's a nice lesson, I'll say it now and we'll repeat it when we get there. What happens, what does an exalted Vaishnava do when an exalted Vaishnava is offended by another person. And it's not just he said some bad things, he tried to kill him. Now what does an exalted Vaishnava do? At least here's one example. Here's what Maharaj Ambarish did. He immediately began offering prayers to the great weapon. So the request is, please give forgiveness. Please do something to help take this reaction to my offense to you away. He's apologized for the offense. Now the reaction for the offense, please mitigate the reaction. The Sudarshan chakra is really hot. So the forgiveness is more than forgiveness. He's praying to Sudarshan to spare Durvasa, who tried to kill him. Oh, Sudarshan chakra. So here, what is Sudarshan chakra? You are fire. You are the most powerful sun, and you are the moon, the master of all luminaries. You are water, earth and sky. You are the air. You are the 5 sense objects, and you are the senses also. Oh, most favorite of Achyuta, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you have thousands of spokes, O Master of the material world, destroyer of all weapons, original vision of the personality of Godhead. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Kindly give shelter and be auspicious to this Brahmana. O Sudarshan wheel, you are religion, you are truth, you are encouraging statements, you are sacrifice, and you are the enjoyer of the fruits of sacrifice. You are the maintainer of the entire universe, and you are the supreme transcendental prowess in the hands of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You are the original vision of the Lord, and therefore you are known as Sudarshana. Sudarshana. Darshana means to see. Sudarshana, the Lord's vision. Everything has been created by your activities, and therefore you are all-pervading. So in the purport, Prabhupada writes, as he wrote also in the chapter summary at the beginning, something it's a little hard for me to understand. Maybe somebody else understands it better. But in the process of creation, Mahavishnu glances over Pradhan. And Pradhan, the glance of Mahavishnu is Sudarshan. Now, elsewhere in the Bhagavatam and in Brahma Samhita, the glance of Mahavishnu has another name, Shambhu, and within the glance of Mahavishnu, 2 things are entrusted to that glance of Mahavishnu by Rama Devi, the internal potency. She entrusts all the living entities who are in their deep sleep state within the body of Mahavishnu. All living entities are transferred to his glance, along with time energy. Now, it makes sense to me, and I haven't read it, so this is just intuitive, but the time energy, what does Krishna say about the time energy? In the Bhagavad Gita, he destroys things. All things that are within the purview of time. There's eternal things that aren't destroyed. But that which destroys is time. So there's some correlation between time, or the destructive feature of time, and the Sudarshan. I'll just read what Prabhupada writes in the purport. The word Sudarshana means, quote, auspicious vision. Sudarshana. From Vedic instructions we understand that this material world is created by the glance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sa aikshata, comma, sa asrijata. Same as in the preface. The Supreme Personality of Godhead who glanced over the Mahatattva, or the total material energy, when it was agitated, everything came into existence. Western philosophies sometimes think that the original cause of creation was a chunk that exploded. If one thinks of this chunk as the material energy, the Mahatattva, one can understand that the chunk was agitated by the glance of the Lord, and thus the Lord's glance is the original cause of material creation. And thus, Sudarshan, everything has been created by your activities. You are the original vision of the Lord, and therefore you're known as Sudarshana. We're getting a Sudarshana education in the Bhagavatam, right in the middle of this Ambarish Maharaj story. Oh, Sudarshana, you have a very auspicious hub, and therefore you are the upholder of all religion. You are just like an auspicious comet, an inauspicious comet, for the irreligious demons. So upholding Dharma and chopping Adharma. That's a Kshatriya function, or it's a function of the Supreme Lord. Indeed, you are the maintainer of the three worlds. You are full of transcendental effulgence. You are as quick as the mind, and you are able to work wonders. I can simply utter the word Namaha, offering all obeisances unto you. So he's praying to Sudarshana. He's educating us by those prayers. Who is Sudarshana anyways? And he's already made the request. He's going to make it again. So in making it common in prayer, there's different elements, but one of the elements is some words of appreciation, not just buttering up or flattery or something, but being very clear about the person unto whom you're offering a prayer. Now, let's go back. His life was threatened by Durvasa Muni. His life was protected by Sudarshana, and then the reaction for the offense of threatening Ambarish's life went against went against Durvasa Muni. And he fled here and there, and now he's at his feet. The offense has been forgiven, but there's a prayer to to minimize the reaction, not just minimize the reaction. Be kind to this person. Show your kindness to this Brahmana. So it's already, the slate is squeaky clean. And he's going beyond the squeaky clean. Be kind upon this Brahmana. Not just, relent from the heat pursuit and destruction pursuit. When he went to Lord Vishnu, Vishnu didn't say, I released Sudarshan Chakra because of your offense. Rather, Sudarshan Chakra pursued Durvasa Muni. Now, indirectly behind, because what does Sudarshan Chakra do but the will of the Supreme Lord? There's no mention, however, the Supreme Lord Vishnu said, go get him. No mention. But we can understand, at least behind Sudarshan doing what Sudarshan did, there's an icha, a desire of the Supreme Lord, protect my devotee. That he doesn't have to, stand in between. Sudarshan Chakra stood in between. The Supreme Lord can act remotely, and at the same time, directly. So he, Ambarish, is praying to Sudarshan, not the offense against me has been forgiven, but please be kind upon him. From yesterday morning's class, a couple of devotees who were listening remotely sent some message about how they had experienced some offense. And they found it very instructive. And in one case it was how they were offended, and in another case it was someone who they hold very dear to them was offended. What do? One of the things you do is you pray for that person not just to be forgiven, but to be, set on the right path. And who are we? We're little people. We're not Maharaj Ambarish. Far from it. But prayer is powerful. And it's appropriate action. It's not just like going beyond forgiveness into wishing well. It's invoking, we'll hear. Maharaj Ambarish is offering everything, any piety, any proper activity that he has performed. Essentially, he's transferring all of that to Durvasa Muni. I mean, how gracious. It doesn't say that exactly, we'll hear, but he's an elevated Vaishnava. We're getting instruction what an elevated Vaishnava looks like, and we're not elevated, but something in that direction is something we can try to cultivate in circumstances of life when something harsh is done to you or to someone dear to you. It happens. And then people have a big problem processing. Why did this happen? There's different responses. One is blaming and finger pointing. Another is, it's my karma. Another is becoming very sad. Blaming oneself or blaming others is a common response, like looking for the cause. Shri Shri Radha Nilamadava Ki Jai. What did Maharaj Ambarish do? Savaimana Krishna Padaravindayo. That's what he did. And what was the strength for him to do it? Because he did it every day and all the time. So when calamity comes, where does the mind go? Well, it depends on what you practice. It's where the mind goes. What you're attached to is where the mind goes. So I find it really incredible. I speak about it so many times. He stood there, motionless, his arms by his side, or in the painting show, his palms folded before him. He's a Kshatriya. He didn't do anything. His feet didn't move, his arms didn't move, his mind didn't move. What was his mind doing? Savaimana Krishna. He had shelter. He's an exceptionally exalted person. It's just instinct. You don't have to think about when something comes flying at your face. You have to think about it. Reflex. He didn't do it. Ooh. And the Supreme Lord protected him through the agency of Sudarshan. Immediately. No, not a moment's delay. There's a nice discussion. I'm going off track, but it's nice anyways. Our acharyas describe, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes, when there was the attempt to throw Prahlad Maharaj off a cliff. They took him up in the mountains, tossed him off the cliff to get smashed on the jagged rocks below. Vishnu didn't show himself right away. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, Vishnu wanted to see, what's he going to do? He was examining him. Not like he didn't know, because he knew, but what's he going to do? And then at the last moment he appeared and caught him. But it wasn't screaming. Someone's tossing you off a cliff. What are you going to do? Probably scream. He was his mind like Maharaj Ambarish. So where was his mind if it wasn't on, I'm crashing to my demise, falling on jagged rocks down to the bottom of a mountaintop. Same. Of the 9 processes of devotion, Prahlad is particularly known for remembrance of Lord Vishnu in all trying circumstances. So we have heroes, and we're not heroes. We look up to heroes, and we can take encouragement, just like one of the qualifications, one of the qualities is words of encouragement. It's nice to get words of encouragement. Sudarshan, protecting you. Now, it can also be, you get words of encouragement, then you get proud. At last somebody's smart enough to recognize how qualified I am. Anyway, pride is insidious. But without pride, then there's Sudarshan, or their protection. So there's destruction, because Sudarshan destroys, time destroys. There's creation, because time creates. And there's protection. Let's go on. Oh, master of speech, this is text 7. By your effulgence, full of religious principles, the darkness of the world is dissipated, and the knowledge of learned persons or great souls is manifested. Indeed, no one can surpass your effulgence, for all things, manifested and unmanifested, gross and subtle, superior and inferior, are but various forms of you that are manifested by your effulgence. There's a nice purport, quick. Without illumination, nothing can be seen, especially in this material world. The illumination in this world emanates from the effulgence of Sudarshana. Now, it comes from the sun. Where does the effulgence of the sun come from? Now, commonly we hear it comes from the Brahmajyoti, but here Prabhupada is writing it comes from Sudarshan. The illuminating principles of the sun, the moon, and fire emanate from Sudarshana. Similarly, illumination by knowledge also comes from Sudarshana, because with the illumination of Sudarshana, one can distinguish one thing from another, the superior from the inferior. So, intelligence is the power to discern or discriminate in the good sense. Do one thing and another thing, and here's two things, and here's how they differ. That's intelligence. It's a function of intelligence. But intelligence doesn't work unless there's, from our understanding of Bhagavad Gita, unless Supersoul prompts. And from Supersoul, intelligence is given, or not. So now here's this interesting connection between making discriminations between one thing and another thing and Sudarshana. It's so exactly how it fits is not clear, other than saying there's certainly some overlap. Exactly how it fits, to me, is not clear, at least. But there's some overlap between the function of the illumination of Sudarshana and the capacity to discriminate one thing from another thing, which is intelligence given by Supersoul. There's some connection. Sudarshana moves by the prompt of Supersoul. It's not that Supersoul has to say, "Hey, Sudarshana, go get him." Or, "Hey, Sudarshana, give intelligence to this nice person over there." It's not like it has to be uttered or that kind of prompt. But Sudarshana is so intimately connected with Lord Vishnu, Supersoul, Paramatma, and all other features of the Supreme Lord, Vishnu, that there doesn't have to be it's an instant communication. It's an unspoken and instant communication. Sudarshana knows what to do without having to, go get him instruction or give knowledge instruction. No need. Generally, people accept a powerful yogi like Durvasa Muni as wonderfully superior, because certainly wonderfully superior. But if such a person is chased by Sudarshana, we can see his real identity and understand how inferior he is because of his dealings with devotees. So Sudarshana is illuminating for us right and wrong. The devotee, Ambarish, and the mystic, Durvasa, and who's the superior, who's the inferior. Sudarshana is giving that illumination. It's almost done the prayer section. Oh, indefatigable one, when you are sent by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to enter among the soldiers of the Daityas and Danavas, you stay on the battlefield and unendingly separate their arms, bellies, thighs, legs, and heads. Ki jai. Now, people may not see Sudarshan moving around, but when those things happen, it's Sudarshan, remote, or, the empowerment of Sudarshan, etc. Oh, protector of the universe, you are engaged by the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his all-powerful weapon in killing the envious enemies for the benefit of our entire dynasty. Kindly favor this poor Brahmana. He will certainly be this will certainly be a favor for all of us. It's a direct appeal. Like, as I am, because he's already said the verse we discussed yesterday, the devotee is in my heart and I'm in their hearts. So you're in my heart, and I'm appealing. So it's going to happen because he's appealing. It's going to happen. He didn't say, well, I'm sorry, I can't. Here's the sacrifice in addition to the appeal. If our family has given charity to the proper persons, if we have performed ritualistic ceremonies and sacrifice, if we have properly carried out our occupational duties, and if we have been guided by learned brahmanas, I wish in exchange that this brahmana be freed from the burning caused by the Sudarshan chakra. Now this sounds like he's not appealing to the Sudarshan chakra, he's appealing to the Lord who's in charge of the Sudarshan chakra. But either way, all of that punya is being bestowed upon. So if he by making this request, what does it mean? By Vedic understanding, it's exhausting his pious credit. He's emptying his bank account, his punya account, and transferring it. Take it all. Anything, everything, for this one thing. And Durvasa Muni is hearing all this. Over there is Sudarshan chakra, like at his back, and over there is Maharaj Ambarish offering prayers. It's a beautiful painting depicting this. Ambarish is gesturing to Sudarshan, who's hovering above the body of Durvasa, who's on the floor, holding Ambarish's feet. If the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is one without a second, who is the reservoir of all transcendental qualities, and who is the life and soul of all living entities, is pleased with us, we wish that this Brahmana Durvasa Muni be freed from the pain of being burned. So now it sounds like he's again talking to Sudarshana, not just the Supreme Lord. Okay, so the rest is also it's a really nice chapter. Anyway, reading all the verses is not normal, but I really like his prayers. We're not used to hearing so much about Sudarshan. Lord Vishnu became pleased. Sudarshan backed off, stopped burning the Brahmana. Durvasa Muni was greatly relieved. He praised Maharaj Ambarish and offered him the highest benedictions, saying, "My dear king, today I have experienced the greatness of devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for although I have committed an offense, you have prayed for my good fortune." Now that's verse 14, and if we were to, have a verse for this morning class, I would have liked this one, although there's no purport. How do you respond? How does a great personality, how does a Vaishnava in principle respond? You wish the welfare. I mean, there's many nice stories, and time doesn't permit because I've gone too much into this story, but there's many nice stories like that. Jayadev Goswami is one, etc. And someone, dacoits tried to kill him, and he just wanted their welfare. For those who have achieved the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Master of the pure devotees, what is impossible to do, Durvasa, and what is impossible to give up? There's nothing impossible. Why? Because the power of everything is with them by the power of the Supreme Lord. That's the exaltedness of a Vaishnava. What is impossible for the servants of the Lord? By the very hearing of his holy name, one is purified. O King, overlooking my offenses, you have saved my life. I am very much obliged to you because you are so merciful. Tatikshava Karunika, Sadhava Sarvabhutanam. We just discussed that verse yesterday from Kapila Dev describing the characteristics of a sadhu. And although the sannyasi yogi, Durvasa Muni, might be, he should carry the characteristics of a sadhu because he's sadhu-like, he's looking up to Maharaj Ambarish, who is a grahastha and a king, who is the superlatives sadhu, Titikshava Karunika. So what happened? Durvasa Muni went all the way to the pole star to see Lord Vishnu and a few stops along the way, and came back in 1 year's time. So for that 1 year, he broke the fast on the Dwadasi day, the final 1 year Ekadasi fast. But for 1 year he just stood motionless, not taking anything to eat except water, waiting for Durvasa Muni's return. And who's to guarantee he's going to return? He could have been burned by the Sudarshan Chakra. But he waited. And before he broke his 1 year fast, except for water, he took care of Durvasa Muni and received him as a guest is to be received, because he'd already taken his bath, remember? He was late coming back. So 1 year later, he fed him sumptuously. And then after the Brahmana was fed, he accepted his meal. That's the culture. So then, I'll read it because it's summarizing what we're the takeaway for us. Durvasa Muni said, "I'm very pleased with you, my dear king. At first I thought you as an ordinary human being and accepted your hospitality, but later I could understand by my own intelligence that you are the most exalted devotee of the Lord. Therefore, simply by seeing you, touching your feet, and talking with you, I've been pleased and have become obliged to you." Became a little bit of a devotee too. So that's 2021. Thus, being satisfied in all respects, the great mystic took permission, left. He didn't go to the sun, he went to Brahmaloka. correction. He went to Brahmaloka. Durvasa Muni had left the place of Maharaja Ambarish, and as long as he had not returned, for 1 complete year the king fasted, maintaining himself simply by drinking water. The credit was being given to Durvasa, to Ambarish. Ambarish is saying the credit goes to the Supreme Lord. What to do when somebody is expressing their gratitude for something you do for them? A natural, there's different options, but one natural option is it goes transferred to those who are above you. Now, it doesn't make any mention here about his father or any mention about his guru. It makes mention of his relationship with the Supreme Lord. He was a Krishna Bhakta. So he gives all credit to the Supreme Lord. Then what happened? There's not a lot of detail, but what happened is, in the mature stage of his life, he divided his kingdom amongst his sons. Although he's already in this, it said in the early parts of the previous chapter, he had no attraction for any of his opulence. Specifically, he saw it as no more valuable than a pebble on the street, a piece of stone. Vast opulence. He just used it in serving his citizens and worshiping the Supreme Lord. So then he divided his kingdom and went into the forest, as we just read this purport. He has transcendental greed. Laulyam. You know that verse from Rupa Goswami's? There's one requirement to attain, specifically is to attain braja, but to attain perfection, spiritual perfection, is a very strong, not just utsahan, enthusiasm, but amplify utsahan a whole bunch. And it becomes like the materialist that wants money, the person that's already at the stage of perfection, that wants perfection of perfection, or wants an unobstructed, undistracted concentration upon the personality of Godhead. Now, different sadhus will go about that in a different way. In our more recent times, Bhaktivinoda Thakur went into seclusion at the end of his life. Bhaktisiddhanta didn't do that, although he had a place where he would go without, the affairs of life. And Prabhupada was at the other end of the spectrum. He just wanted to give himself completely to his mission, the mission that was assigned to him by the Supreme Lord and by his spiritual master to the very end. So he took, reading on the screen, he took the order of Vanaprastha and went to the forest to concentrate his mind fully upon Lord Vasudeva. And it's not that his mind wasn't already fully concentrated. He just desisted from the worldly feature of engaging things in service to the Supreme Lord and entered another stage. Prabhupada, as beyond Vanaprastha, sannyas, he did that plus. And it seems that he encourages us to do the same. So keep going, Prabhus. This benediction that we heard, you'll become a pure devotee. Keep working on it. Become a pure devotee. The potency will grow and grow because, your receiving of that potency will grow and grow as purification takes place. And I look forward to seeing you all in the spiritual world. Any discussion? How are we doing with time? 8:30. Yes?
Just a small question. So, Maharaj Ambarish, I think you used the word punya. He gave all of his punya to Durvasa Muni. So I've also heard the word sukriti, and I'm not clear on the difference between the two, punya and sukriti.
I'm not a Sanskritist. From a distance, not being a Sanskritist, I would offer they're the same, if not almost the same. Different terms can refer to the same thing from a different angle of vision. And that's all. The only is the difference. So it's from a neophyte Sanskritist. I'm not a Sanskritist. I'm not even a neophyte. They're the same. It's activities that are recommended in the scriptures because they're beneficial for the living entity to gain pious merit. That's punya or sukriti. You have any comment on this question? Okay. He's not a Sanskritist either. Yes? On the front, you have something? No? Okay.
Just a small comment on something I've noticed between punya and
A small comment on?
What I've noticed between punya and sukriti. I'm sorry, my throat is pretty sore. I think sukriti has been used more in relation, the Sanskrit root is the same.
More in relation to what?
The Sanskrit root is the same, but sukriti has been used more to denote something that adds to your Krishna consciousness. So,
not necessarily, I'm sorry. Maybe, but the usage, as Prabhupada used it, but it's not, sukriti is piety. And then maybe because of the conversation in the Bhagavatam being more about devotees than brahmanas that do pious activities or mode of goodness people that do pious activities, and therefore it falls in that other bucket. Let's take, for example, Krita Punya Punja. You know the verse? Shukadeva Goswami, right in the midst of describing Krishna's childhood pastimes with the cowherd boys and the cows, says, wow, Krita Punya, Punja, what pious activities have these cowherd boys done? And it's not Sukriti, it's Punya. It's a nice verse. Anyone else? Yes?
In relation to the Sudarshan Chakra, it reminded me of a verse from the 5th canto, 14th chapter.
5th canto, chapter 1.
Chapter 14.
Chapter 14.
Text 29.
Okay, let's hear it.
Says, the personal weapon used by Lord Krishna, the disc, is called Hari Chakra, the disc of Hari. This chakra is the wheel of time. It expands from the beginning of the atoms up to the time of Brahma's death, and it controls all activities. It is always revolving and spending the lives of the living entities, from Lord Brahma down to an insignificant blade of grass. And then it goes on further how it changes the bodies.
Describing Kala Chakra as Sudarshan Chakra. Because chakra means wheel, and there can be different wheels. Okay. You have something? Okay. Back there, you have something.
Punya and Sukriti, we hear that...
Don't get stuck.
No, it's a different question.
Okay.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives us causeless mercy, and Shukadeva Goswami was saying that the cowherd boys, they had punya to associate with Krishna. So do we, on the power of some pious activity, come in touch with Krishna consciousness, or
Well,
is it just...
terms are to be understood in terms of context. And punya, in the context of pious activities, there's like, agyata sukriti, unknowing pious activities. But the unknowing pious activities can be on the material or on the spiritual platform. So let's not go on this further. It depends on the context, how you understand a Sanskrit term. And we take guidance from our acharyas how to understand the context. But that, common sense can also tell us some things about context. Krishna Kripa, anything? Shanti, you usually have something nice to say, so I'm just speaking your name.
Well, all I can say is that I've been reading the Adi Lila, and I'm in the 7th chapter, which has spent 3 chapters describing the Lord in his various forms and his various energies and his various weapons and all these things. So all of them have full consciousness as the Lord, apparently. And when you said that the Sudarshan Chakra wasn't called, but the deity is inside the temple and he's worshipped and given everything to the deity, so everything just kind of happens in some of these spiritual pastimes. It's just interesting how it plays out.
Thank you. I know you'd say something nice. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.